I found the envelope on a Sunday. It wasn't hidden. No locks. No codes. No fireproof safe. Just sitting there, on the kitchen counter, right under the window where the morning light hits. Like it wanted to be seen. Like it had been waiting for me. That envelope, plain white with a single sheet inside, cracked something in me that still hasn't healed. I should back up. My name is Daniel Monroe. I'm 46. I built a logistics and supply chain company from scratch, headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. Took 20 years, 2 recessions, 3 betrayals, and more missed birthdays than I can count. But I made it. Monroe Solutions is one of the top mid-size firms in the Southeast. We move goods for half the grocery chains in the state. I'm proud of that. I met Cassandra, Cass, when I was just starting out. She was the daughter of a banker I was pitching for a small business loan. I wasn't supposed to notice her. She was just there, sipping a black coffee at the edge of the meeting table. But there was something in the way she crossed her legs and looked bored that pulled me in. She was sharp. Ivy League. Unimpressed. I liked the challenge. We got married 5 months later. Now, 21 years down the line, the same woman I once chased through airports and wine bars is standing in front of me on a Thursday night in May, asking me, without flinching, if we can open the marriage. You know it's not about love, she said, swirling her wine. It's about freedom. Honesty. Evolution. That word, evolution, like we were some science experiment. I stared at her. Tried to read the flicker in her eyes. I wanted to believe this was a moment of insanity, a midlife crisis wrapped in self-help slogans. But no, she'd rehearsed this. She'd waited for the right night. Said it like she was pitching a partnership. Cass, I said, trying to hold onto whatever calm I had left, are you asking me for permission to cheat? She didn't blink. If we get divorced, she replied, the company gets split. The board won't survive the transition. You'll lose the business, Dan. You know it. I know it. This is the smarter option. Smarter. Like marriage had become a transaction we needed to renegotiate. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. Got up. Drove around aimlessly for hours while she pretended to read in bed. She knew I'd come back. I always came back. That Sunday, I found the envelope. Inside, there was a contract. No lawyer's letterhead. Just a draft she'd typed up on her laptop, terms for the non-monogamous arrangement. It outlined schedules, boundaries, discretion clauses. Like a damn business plan for adultery. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What shattered me was the line that read, Cassandra Monroe retains all rights to 51% of Monroe Solutions Incorporated unless a divorce is filed by her party. She wasn't just asking for an open marriage. She was putting a knife to my throat and telling me to smile. Now, let me tell you something. You don't survive in business without learning how to play the long game. I've made deals with men twice as rich and 3 times as dishonest. I've watched competitors bury themselves because they got emotional, reactive, sloppy. I wasn't going to be sloppy. That night, I poured a glass of scotch, sat in my office, and started sketching out a plan, not just to keep my business, but to take everything back. Every single thing. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That would be too easy. Too loud. Instead, I pretended. I became the husband she wanted, a man open to evolution. I told her I needed time, asked questions, acted curious. She bought it. Started going out more. Joined a wellness collective in Asheville. Booked weekend retreats. She said she was discovering her authentic self. I told her I was proud of her. Meanwhile, I started investigating. Quietly. Cass had always kept our finances intertwined. That was her leverage. But I knew things she didn't, like the way certain assets could be moved through shell corporations, or how small amendments to board agreements could dilute majority control without raising red flags. I brought in Brian, my old college roommate who now specialized in discreet corporate restructuring. We met at a bar in Atlanta, where no one would recognize us. I told him everything. You sure she hasn't lawyered up? He asked, swirling his bourbon like it held answers. Not yet, I said. But she's planning something. I can feel it. He looked at me. Then you'd better move fast. I did. Over the next 6 weeks, I shifted 24% of voting shares into a blind trust one controlled through an LLC in Delaware. I redrew employment contracts to give me final say on board appointments. I even leaked a fake rumor about a merger to distract attention from the real changes I was making. Cass was too busy rediscovering herself to notice. Or maybe she didn't care anymore. Maybe she thought she'd already won. Then came the night I saw the text message. She left her phone on the counter while she stepped into the shower. It buzzed once. Then again. A third time. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. Eli, miss your mouth already. Eli, think about last night all day. Want more? Soon. Eli, you tell him yet? I didn't feel rage. I felt empty. Like all the blood had left my body in one quick, clean evacuation. Eli was 32. Worked in our marketing division. A junior exec I'd mentored. Promoted. Took to conferences in Chicago and Austin. I'd even written him a personal letter of recommendation for grad school last year. She was screwing someone I trusted like a little brother. I stood there in the kitchen, phone in hand, listening to the sound of water hitting tile, and something inside me clicked into place. All the pain, the confusion, the betrayal, it solidified into resolve. This wasn't about keeping the company anymore. This was about war. I slid her phone back where I found it. When she stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, smelling like lavender and lies, she looked at me and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. I kissed her forehead. And lied straight to her face. "Just how lucky I am," I said. It was around 8:30 in the morning when he walked into my office, unannounced, like he owned the place. I was nursing a black coffee, barely halfway through an email about quarterly projections, when my assistant buzzed. "Ah, Mr. Monroe. There's a gentleman here. Says you'll want to speak with him. He won't give his name." That got my attention. I told her to send him in. He wore a gray suit that looked expensive but a little out of place in North Carolina heat. His hair was slicked back in that overly neat way Wall Street types seem to like, and his eyes scanned the room with the cold efficiency of someone who'd been trained to notice too much. "Daniel Monroe," he said, extending his hand. "It's been a while." I didn't recognize him. Not at first. But something about his voice tugged at an old memory, college maybe, or early networking days. Somewhere back when I still believed people's intentions matched their words. "You'll have to help me out," I said carefully. "You are." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Logan Pierce. I was engaged to Cassandra. Back before you." The air shifted. I set the coffee down. Now I remembered. They dated right before I met her. She mentioned him once or twice, briefly, dismissively, like someone you outgrow. She'd said he was intense. Controlling. A little too ambitious for his own good. She made it sound like she'd dodged a bullet. Yet here he was, very much intact. "I didn't know you two kept in touch," I said, choosing my words. "We don't," he replied, walking slowly around the office like he was cataloging everything he saw. "But I saw her last week. Coincidentally. At a conference in Asheville. Of course. The wellness retreat." "She didn't mention it," I said flatly. "She wouldn't. We didn't speak for long. Just long enough for her to say something curious. She said you were opening the marriage." I smiled politely. "That's not exactly public information." "No," he said, stepping closer. "But she never was good at keeping quiet. Especially when she's trying to make someone jealous." I let the silence hang. "You didn't come here just to reminisce," I finally said. "No," Logan said. "I came to tell you something you might want to know before she makes her next move." I folded my hands. "Go on." "She's broke," he said, bluntly. "Blew through 2 trust funds, lied about some real estate investments in Scottsdale, and pissed off some very bad people trying to flip property with private money." I frowned. She's always had money. And access to mine. Which is exactly why she's doing this. She's been down this road before, Dan. You're just the cleanest exit strategy. I felt my jaw clench, but I said nothing. He saw it. Don't believe me, he continued. Check her accounts. The ones she thinks you don't know about. Look into a wire transfer from a guy named Dax Morelli out of Miami. Loan shark. She owes him over $100,000. And that's just what I know about. I stood, walked to the window. I watched the delivery trucks lining up at the dock, my empire, humming along like nothing was wrong. When did she contact you? I asked. She didn't. I ran into her at the hotel bar. She tried to play it cool, but she's nervous. Real nervous. Said she might need a friend soon. That's why I came. Not because I want anything. God knows I dodged my own disaster with her. But you've got more to lose than I ever did. He handed me a small card, black, matte, with a single number printed on it. If she makes a move, you call me. I still know people who do quiet work. He didn't wait for me to respond. Just nodded once, then left. I stood there for a long time, staring at the card, weighing whether this was just some bitter ex stirring the pot, or if it was something more. That night, I checked her accounts. It took 15 minutes to find the offshore transfers. She had been siphoning money from our joint investments into an account in the Caymans. Small amounts at first, $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Then bigger, $12,000, $25,000. Over the course of a year, nearly $300,000 had been moved under the radar. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. She wasn't just preparing for freedom. She was preparing for escape. The next morning, I told her I'd decided to try the open marriage. She blinked, caught off guard for the first time in weeks. Then smiled like she'd won something. That's wonderful, Dan, she said. Truly. I'm proud of you. We had wine that night. She lit candles. Acted affectionate. As if our marriage had been saved by a new rulebook. But all I could think about was how she'd kissed me with the same mouth she used to lie, and lie well. Over the next week, I played the part. I joined a fake dating site under a pseudonym. Let her see the profile on my laptop by accident. She pretended not to notice, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, satisfaction, relief. Maybe even a hint of guilt. I also hired a private investigator. Discreet. Veteran. The kind of guy who could make himself invisible in a hotel bar or a yoga studio. What he found made me sick. There wasn't just Eli. There were two others. One was a divorce named Travis who owned a vineyard in Virginia. The other was an artist, some trust fund burnout with a warehouse loft in Atlanta. She'd told each of them different stories. That we were separated. That I was abusive. That she was trapped. And the worst part? She was laying the groundwork to accuse me of fraud. She'd met with a lawyer in Raleigh. Claimed I'd been hiding business assets. That she had evidence. She was preparing to flip the narrative. She wasn't going to leave me. She was going to destroy me. That weekend, I went to the lake house alone. Took a bottle of bourbon and the file from the PI. Sat by the water and stared out at the dark reflection of trees swaying over the surface. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel the weight of everything. The marriage. The lies. The slow, silent erosion of trust. It was all too much. Until I remembered something. The prenup. She thought it was voided years ago when we restructured the business together. But the version she signed, the original, was still legal. I'd just never mentioned it again. And it had one specific clause she never paid attention to: any extramarital affair, if proven, immediately voids her claims to marital assets tied to my company. But I needed proof. Documented. Time-stamped. Undeniable. Which meant I had to let her think she was safe. For just a little longer. I'd let her build her case. Then I'd burn it all down around her. But not yet. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's surgical. Trust is a funny thing. You can spend years building it with someone, and it still takes less than 30 seconds for them to bury a knife in your back. I found that out on a Wednesday. The office was quiet, that sort of midweek lull where everyone's grinding through spreadsheets and Zoom calls. I was in the conference room, reviewing vendor contracts with Megan, our CFO. She was sharp, serious, dressed like every day was an investor pitch. The kind of woman who knew where every dollar went, and why. "I need you to cross-reference these invoices from Ridgepoint," I said, pointing to a line item. "We're being billed for transport we didn't authorize." She nodded, took a note, and said, "You sure you want to do this right now? You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I said. "But I'm not interested in Ridgepoint padding our margins." What I didn't say was that I hadn't slept because I'd spent the last 2 nights watching surveillance footage of my wife sneaking into hotels with a man 10 years younger than me. The private investigator, Blake, sent me the clips in a secure folder. Time-stamped. High resolution. Undeniable. I hadn't opened the last video yet. I knew who it was, Eli. The protege. The marketing golden boy. The little snake I once trusted with our brand and vision. Watching that final video felt like accepting something I still wasn't ready to put into words. After the meeting, I went back to my office. The door barely shut before Megan followed me in. She didn't sit. "I overheard something," she said quietly. I looked up. "Who?" "Jessica," she said. "From HR." She was in the copy room on the phone. She didn't know I was in the hallway. She was talking to Cassandra. That got my full attention. Jessica was bubbly, harmless, or so I thought. She started with us 2 years ago. Wore sunflower earrings and brought cupcakes on people's birthdays. I'd never have pegged her as someone with a hidden agenda. "What did she say?" I asked. She said, "He doesn't suspect a thing." Then she laughed and said, "It'll all be over soon." I waited. She mentioned your name. Then said something about files being taken care of. My stomach turned. Files. We were in the middle of quarterly audits. If someone was feeding Cassandra information, or worse, manipulating internal records, that wasn't just betrayal, it was sabotage. "Do not mention this to anyone," I said. She nodded. "Already deleted it from my notes app. I know how deep this runs." When she left, I locked the door and opened the final surveillance video. There they were. Cassandra in a navy trench coat. Eli in jeans and a blazer, trying too hard to look older. They kissed in the parking lot, bold and stupid. She grabbed his hand like a teenager sneaking around after curfew. The timestamp, 9:17 p.m., 2 nights ago. She told me she was at a spa in Raleigh. They didn't even bother checking for cameras. That night, I did what I had to do. I called Blake and told him to run background checks on Jessica. I needed to know everything: bank accounts, calls, affiliations. She wasn't working alone. I could feel it. Then I opened the prenup. The clause was still there. Ironclad. Paragraph 9, subsection B. In the event of a proven extramarital affair by either party, said party forfeits all claims to marital property and business holdings not held jointly. It would hold. But the proof had to be legally admissible. Surveillance footage was good. Testimony was better. Digital correspondence, email, texts, messages, that was the nail in the coffin. I needed access to her phone. And I had one shot. The next day, I invited Cassandra to lunch. We met at one of those upscale fusion places she liked: white marble tables, artisan cocktails, a menu that looked like an art exhibit. She wore sunglasses too big for her face and a silk scarf like she was starring in her own movie. "You seem upbeat," she said, sipping a cucumber gin fizz. "I've been thinking," I said, smiling. "Maybe you were right. About all of it." She cocked her head. "About freedom. About not being defined by what society expects. Maybe this is what we needed all along." I saw her relax. The tension around her mouth softened. She touched my hand across the table. "You have no idea how happy that makes me," she said. While she excused herself to the restroom, I reached into her purse, hanging casually off the back of her chair, and slipped her phone into my blazer. I had exactly 6 minutes. I walked out to the parking lot, slid into my car, and plugged the phone into the clone drive Blake had given me. It mirrored the device in under 5 minutes, transferring data to a secure SSD. I wiped any trace of tampering and returned it to her bag before she got back. She didn't suspect a thing. That night, Blake decrypted the backup. What we found was worse than I imagined. She'd been emailing her lawyer, a sharp, aggressive woman named Vanessa Carter, not just about divorce, but about a strategy. Cassandra was positioning herself as the victim of a hostile marriage, claiming I was emotionally abusive, manipulative, and mentally unstable. She'd even drafted fake journal entries and backdated them. She was building a narrative, with Jessica's help. Jessica was feeding her confidential HR reports. Anything that could be twisted into a claim of toxic behavior. A joke I made at a Christmas party. A terse email. An executive reshuffle where someone got demoted. It was all being weaponized. And then there was Eli. Turns out, he wasn't just a fling. He was a pawn. She'd promised him a stake in the company, post-divorce, if he testified against me. Said I made inappropriate comments in meetings. That I was drinking on the job. That I'd become erratic and volatile. They had a whole timeline. And it was supposed to kick off in 3 weeks. She was going to serve me papers at our anniversary dinner. The cruelty of it, the timing, that wasn't strategy. That was personal. I forwarded everything to my attorney, a bulldog named David Kessler. He called me an hour later. "You're sitting on a gold mine," he said. "This is premeditated fraud, Dan. If this goes to court, she's done." But what? "You can't let her know you know." "Not yet. We have to let her walk into the trap." I leaned back in my chair, staring at my wedding photo on the bookshelf. Her smile, my hand on her waist, like we had it all figured out. "Don't worry," I said. "She won't see it coming." The first thing I noticed was that Eli stopped making eye contact with me. It was subtle at first. He'd pass me in the hallway and look slightly to the left of my face, like I was a ghost he wasn't ready to admit he'd seen. He used to greet me with that annoyingly eager "Hey, boss," like I was a mentor or something. Now, just a nod. Sometimes not even that. And then he started making mistakes. Small ones. Sloppy formatting in pitch decks. A typo on a client deliverable. Forgetting to CC the VP on a campaign update. He was slipping, and it wasn't just nerves. It was guilt. Or maybe fear. Either way, I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I needed him to break first. I started turning up the pressure, nothing obvious. Just little things. Showing up unannounced to his team meetings. Asking pointed questions about budget allocations. Pretending not to understand simple marketing terms he'd used 100 times. Microaggressions, the kind that make insecure people spiral. By the end of the week, he was sweating through his button-downs and double-checking every sentence he said to me. It was like watching a tower of Jenga sway just before the crash. But it was what happened Friday night that changed everything. Blake called me around 10:30 p.m. "I followed Eli to a condo in South Durham," he said. "Not Cassandra's usual place." He wasn't alone. My stomach tightened. Who was with him? Jessica. Silence. "They kissed in the hallway," Blake added. "She went inside with him. They were laughing. Drinking." I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone. "So it wasn't just Cassandra," I said slowly. "No," Blake replied. "It never is." I couldn't sleep that night. I kept playing it over in my head. The affair with Cassandra was bad enough, but Jessica too. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. She was using Eli to get to me, and Eli was using Jessica to feed Cassandra more internal intel. They were building a pyramid of lies, and I was supposed to be the idiot at the base, holding it up. But here's the thing about pyramids, they fall hard when the foundation starts to rot. The next morning, I walked into the office early, before anyone else had arrived. I went straight to the server room. I keep redundant backups of all employee emails, internal security policy. Most execs forget about it. Jessica certainly had. I pulled her logs for the past 60 days and set Blake on them like a bloodhound. He found 3 burner Gmail addresses. One linked to Cassandra. One to her lawyer. And one to a name I didn't recognize, E. Nash. It didn't take long to figure out that was Eli's middle name. They were planning to go to the board. Not the public board, the private advisory group Cassandra and I had formed when we first expanded. Old friends, a few venture partners, a retired senator. People who liked her charm and hated confrontation. She was preparing to paint a picture, a husband unraveling, a wife concerned for the company's image, a loyal protege who'd reluctantly come forward with evidence. She wanted me ousted before the divorce. She wanted it all. I scheduled a board meeting for the following Thursday. Just a routine quarterly update. But I had something else in mind. Over the next few days, I compiled a portfolio, carefully curated and legally vetted. Blake helped me structure it into a clean narrative: Cassandra's affairs, the coordinated smear campaign, the financial siphoning, and most importantly, the clause in our prenup. We also dug up her communications with Dax Morelli, the Miami loan shark Logan had warned me about. There were screenshots, voice memos, even a bank statement showing a late-night cash transfer she'd made under a fake LLC name. She wasn't just immoral. She was criminal. By Wednesday, I had everything I needed. But I still needed one last thing, a crack in Eli. And so, I paid him a visit. I caught him in the break room, alone, pouring almond milk into a travel mug. His hand trembled slightly when he saw me. "Eli," I said, calmly. "Walk with me." We stepped into the hallway. "Look, if this is about the draft," he started. "It's not," I said. "I know." He froze. His throat twitched. "Know what?" "I know you've been seeing Cassandra. And Jessica. And that you've been helping them build a case against me." His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. "I also know you're not the mastermind here," I continued. "You're a pawn. You think she loves you. You're just a character in her story. A temporary alibi with great hair. That's not. She promised you a stake in the company, right? After the divorce." He blinked, and that was all the answer I needed. "I'll offer you a better deal," I said. "Full immunity. A letter from my attorney guaranteeing non-prosecution for any internal misconduct, if you sign a sworn affidavit detailing everything. Every conversation. Every plan. Every message." He looked like he might cry. "You don't know what she's capable of," he said softly. "She said if I backed out, she'd ruin me." I leaned in. "So let her try. But ask yourself something first: when the dust settles, which side of the courtroom do you want to be sitting on?" He came to my office an hour later and signed everything. And just like that, the pyramid began to crumble. The board meeting. The room was quiet when I finished my presentation. 12 people sat around the mahogany table, brows furrowed, jaws clenched. Cassandra sat across from me, perfectly composed in a cream blazer and red lipstick, legs crossed like she was waiting for a waiter to refill her drink. I passed out the final page. Eli's affidavit. Her face didn't move, but her eyes betrayed her. Just for a moment. A flash of disbelief. Rage. Panic. "I trusted you," she whispered at him. Eli didn't speak. I stood. "What you see here is not just personal betrayal. It's coordinated sabotage. Fraud. Conspiracy. Cassandra used company resources, staff, and sensitive information to orchestrate a hostile takeover through emotional blackmail and deception." I turned to the board. "My recommendation is clear: initiate a formal investigation, suspend Cassandra from all advisory roles, and prepare legal proceedings to reclaim any misappropriated funds." No one argued. Not one word. Cassandra stood and left the room in silence, her heels echoing like gunshots across the marble floor. But I wasn't finished. That night, I filed for divorce. On my terms. They say court is war in slow motion. Paper replaces bullets. Depositions are ambushes. And every word is a landmine waiting to blow up under the wrong foot. 3 weeks after I filed for divorce, we were waist-deep in motions, filings, countersuits, and subpoenas. My legal team, David Kessler and his partner Lana Cho, were brutal, methodical, and expensive. Worth every cent. Cassandra's lawyer, Vanessa Carter, came at us with everything she had, but we were always one step ahead. Because I knew the truth. And the truth was mine now. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have seen coming, was what she'd been hiding long before the affair, before Eli, before this whole sick mess started. It started with an old name. Kessler had assigned a private investigator to trace Cassandra's financial history, not just the last few years, but before she married me. He wanted a full forensic audit. I assumed it would turn up some maxed-out credit cards, maybe a sketchy college loan she'd lied about. I wasn't prepared for what they found. She hadn't always been Cassandra Whitmore. 10 years ago, she went by a different name, Sandra Lee Monroe. The name triggered something in the back of my mind. It sounded familiar in the way nightmares do, something half-forgotten but radioactive under the surface. Kessler dropped the file on my desk with a grim look. "You're going to want to read this in private." I did. And what I read made my blood run cold. Back in 2011, Sandra Monroe was the lead suspect in a high-profile fraud case in Phoenix, Arizona. She had allegedly scammed a tech startup CEO out of $400,000, pretending to be a PR consultant with access to major investors. When the deal collapsed and the money disappeared, so did she. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence and witness credibility issues. No one could prove she'd falsified documents herself. The CEO, a man named Marcus Brandt, had a nervous breakdown, moved to Mexico, and refused to testify. The case was closed. 3 months later, Sandra legally changed her name. Moved to the East Coast. Enrolled in a marketing program in Atlanta. And 1 year after that, met me. I stared at the photo from the old case file. Her hair was darker. Her face a little younger. But the smile, the carefully calculated innocence, was exactly the same. She had done this before. And she'd gotten away with it. The woman I married wasn't just a liar. She was a con artist. I sat alone in my office for over an hour, staring at the photo, replaying every moment of our marriage like it was a crime scene. Our first date in Charleston. Our wedding in Asheville. The night she told me she wanted kids, something I now knew was a manipulation. None of it was real. None of it had ever been real. I thought I had been playing her. But the truth was, I'd walked into a game she started long before I even knew her name. That night, I confronted her. Not in public. Not with lawyers. Just us. She was still living at the beach house, pretending the court orders were some kind of performance. She dressed like she had somewhere to be, full makeup, heels, always ready for a camera that wasn't there. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she didn't flinch. "Well," she said, leaning on the doorframe. "Didn't expect you to knock." "I know who you are," I said quietly. A flicker passed across her eyes. "Oh," she said lightly. "Enlighten me." "Marcus Brandt," I said. Phoenix. 2011. There was a beat of silence. The kind that shifts the air in a room. Then she smiled. "I was wondering when you'd find that." "You set him up," I said. "Ruined him." "He was a narcissist with a messiah complex and a drug problem," she said, unbothered. "I didn't ruin him. He imploded. I just gave him a push." I could barely look at her. "So this was all planned. From the start." "Daniel," she said, stepping closer, "you weren't a mark. You were the mark. You had it all. The perfect blend: money, ambition, insecurity. I could have walked away after the first year. I almost did. But then." She shrugged. "You fell in love," I said bitterly. She laughed. "God, no. But I'll admit, I like the lifestyle. The power. And you made it so easy." I felt something break inside me. Not anger. Not even grief. Clarity. She wasn't just my enemy. She was a professional. And that meant she had a pattern. Back at the office, I called Kessler. "We need to find Marcus Brandt," I said. Now. It took 3 days. He was living under a new name in Tulum, working at a bar that served tourists watered-down cocktails. When Blake approached him, he refused to talk at first. Said it was all in the past. That he'd moved on. Then Blake showed him the photo of Cassandra at the board meeting. Smiling like a CEO's wife. Holding a glass of white wine like it was a crown. He agreed to talk. Marcus flew in 2 days later. I met him at a diner near the office. He looked older, sunburned, but his eyes were still sharp. She ruined me, he said, staring into his coffee. But I was too proud to admit it. I thought I was the genius. The visionary. Turns out I was just her latest investor. She's doing it again, I said. He nodded. She will always do it again. That's what she is. He gave me access to his old correspondence, emails, messages, photos, signed NDAs she'd forced him to delete but hadn't actually vanished from the cloud. It was enough to establish a pattern of fraud. Enough to destroy Cassandra's image in any courtroom. But it came with a cost. If we introduced this evidence, it would go public. Headlines. Exposure. Our company's name would be attached to a scandal that might stain us for years. Kessler asked me point blank. You want revenge? Or survival? I stared at Cassandra's old photo on my desk. I want both. By the end of the week, our legal strategy had shifted. We filed a supplemental claim, patterned spousal fraud supported by external victim testimony. Cassandra's team tried to strike it. Claimed it was irrelevant. Ancient history. Unprovable. The judge disagreed. Now she was cornered. And when cornered animals panic, they make mistakes. That's exactly what I was counting on. They say a person backed into a corner will show you who they really are. I had just forgotten how vicious Cassandra could be when she wasn't pretending to love you. Her silence after the court allowed Marcus's testimony into the record lasted exactly 3 days. Then she struck. It was a Wednesday morning. I had just finished a breakfast meeting with a new investor who, thankfully, didn't seem spooked by the scandal brewing in the background. I remember thinking, for the first time in weeks, that maybe I could win this. Then Lana called. You need to get in here. Now. There was something in her voice that told me this wasn't just a routine filing. When I walked into the firm's downtown office, she didn't even offer me coffee. She just handed me a thick envelope and gave me a look like she was about to tell me someone had died. Inside were printed screenshots of an anonymous email tip sent to multiple outlets, Raleigh Business Journal, WRAL, even Bloomberg. The subject line read, Company CEO suppressed abuse allegations while building his fortune. And then there it was. An accusation that, years ago, 12 years ago, to be exact, I had covered up an incident with a former intern at my first startup. Her name was Lisa Carroll. The email claimed I'd harassed her, then paid her off after she threatened to go public. It even included a doctored photo of us at a company holiday party, framed to look more intimate than it was. I sat down slowly, the floor tilting under me. I've never touched that girl, I said. Lisa, she was an intern for 3 months. She left to join a PR firm. I wrote her a letter of recommendation. Lana nodded. We checked. There's no public record of a complaint. No payout. No settlement. Nothing legal. But that doesn't matter if this hits the press. Perception will override facts, especially with your trial coming. She planted this, I said. She's smart, Kessler muttered. And desperate. We cornered her with the Marcus Brandt angle, so now she's swinging low, trying to drag your reputation through the mud. What do we do? Kessler folded his hands. We get ahead of it. Find Lisa. Get a statement. Prove it's a lie. Then we sue Cassandra for defamation and retaliatory misconduct. And if we can't find her? He didn't answer. I couldn't eat that night. Couldn't think. My hands kept shaking. Because here's the thing, I knew Cassandra was capable of cheating, lying, manipulating. But this was scorched earth. She was willing to destroy me publicly just to win. But the worst part? Somewhere, in the back of my mind, a shadow of doubt started whispering, what if Lisa thinks something happened? I barely remembered the Christmas party that year. There had been whiskey. Dancing. Someone played Sinatra on a Bluetooth speaker. Lisa had a soft laugh and wore a green velvet dress. She had thanked me for the letter and said I was the only one who believed in her. Then she left the company a week later. Was it possible I misread something back then? Or that she had? I needed answers. Blake tracked her down 2 days later. She was living in Chicago now, working in communications at a Fortune 100 company. Married. 2 kids. Her LinkedIn still listed her internship under my name. I asked her to meet. To my surprise, she agreed. We sat at a rooftop cafe near Millennium Park. She looked older, calmer, her hair pulled back, no makeup, navy blazer. Professional. She smiled politely, but there was a stiffness in her eyes. Lisa, I began, I know this is strange. But I need to ask you something directly. She folded her hands. I saw the email, she said quietly. A reporter forwarded it to me. My throat tightened. Did you send it? She laughed. No. God, no. Daniel, I was furious. Someone is using my name for a cheap shot. Then nothing happened between us. She shook her head. You were my boss. You were tough but fair. You helped me get my first job out of school. I have no idea who sent that, but if I had to guess. She didn't finish. You think it was Cassandra, I said. Lisa gave me a long look. I remember her. She came to the office once, during that holiday party. I remember because she kept glaring at me. I thought it was weird, honestly. Why would she do this now? Lisa picked up her glass. Because she knows what weaponizing an allegation like this does. And she knows most people won't fact-check it before they run with it. I leaned forward. Would you be willing to issue a formal statement? Say that none of this is true. Lisa nodded slowly. Yes. But there's something you should know. What? She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled envelope. This came to my house last week. No return address. Inside were copies of our old emails, edited and cropped to look suggestive. A note typed in all caps read, if you speak to the press, your real secrets go public. She looked at me with something between fear and pity. She's playing chess, Lisa said. And she's very good at it. Back in Raleigh, we went public first. Lana arranged for Lisa to give a recorded statement through her company's legal team. The press released it ahead of the anonymous tip, which we framed as a false retaliation effort during a contentious divorce. It worked. Mostly. The rumors still swirled. There were think pieces. Tweets. A podcast episode speculating about toxic tech brothers. But the legal case held. Cassandra's attack had backfired. And then she disappeared. Stopped showing up to court. Didn't answer her lawyer. Moved out of the beach house. Even her Instagram, once full of designer selfies and faux-poetic captions, went dark. At first, I thought it was another move. Then I got the call from Kessler. You're going to want to sit down. The private investigator had found something. A hidden offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Under the alias S. Monroe. In it, over $1.3 million in slow, steady deposits across 3 years. All of it pulled from our company. Quietly. Strategically. Invisible under normal audits, but not to someone who knew where to look. The account was linked to a larger shell corporation that had also received funds from Dax Morelli, the Miami loan shark Logan warned me about. And suddenly, it made sense. This wasn't just about me. This was about debts. Someone, likely Dax, had pressured Cassandra to find capital fast. She didn't just marry me for comfort. She married me for access. She'd been laundering our company's profits to keep herself, and maybe her life, out of someone else's crosshairs. That night, I stood in my home office, staring out over the city skyline. It had cost me everything to uncover the truth. But now I understood the real danger. This wasn't just a divorce. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a criminal operation, and I was sitting on the center of the web. The final move was coming. And I had to decide whether to end her, or save her. Some men go to war with swords. I went to war in a gray suit, holding a folder that could ruin the woman I once promised to protect. It was the final hearing. The culmination of months of surveillance, depositions, leaked scandals, emotional carnage. Cassandra sat across from me in the courtroom, calm as ever, wearing a muted blue dress with not a hair out of place, like the last 6 months had been an extended vacation, not a scorched earth divorce. The courtroom was packed. Reporters in the back row. Our lawyers on either side like generals flanking their commanders. Judge Hargrave, who'd seen everything from embezzlement to murder during his 2 decades on the bench, looked exhausted before we even began. Kessler stood first. Clear, cold, surgical. He laid it all out, the affair with Eli, the hidden Cayman account, the false sexual misconduct allegations, the laundering trail leading back to Dax Morelli. Then he turned to the screen where we played the surveillance footage, Cassandra handing an envelope to a courier in a Miami alley. A transaction that matched the deposit into her Shell account. He didn't shout. He didn't show emotion. He just cut the truth into the room like a knife. Then it was Vanessa's turn, Cassandra's attorney. She didn't deny the affair. Or the offshore account. She claimed Cassandra had made a single terrible mistake out of fear, and never intended to defraud her husband or harm the company. She painted me as a calculating, vengeful man who'd been planning to replace her anyway. Said this was all about ego and control. And then Cassandra took the stand. She looked directly at me as she spoke. I loved Daniel, she said softly, her voice catching at just the right places. But I stopped recognizing the men I married. He became someone cold. Distant. Obsessed with power. I felt trapped. And yes, I did something desperate. But only because I knew that if I asked for help, he'd weaponize it. Her eyes shimmered. It was a perfect performance. Oscar-worthy. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I had the truth. I had more than that, I had her confession. Because 3 days earlier, she made a mistake. She called me. Alone. No lawyers. Just her voice, breaking, trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. But you were never going to let me leave with anything. So I had to find my own way out. I had recorded it. And under North Carolina's one-party consent laws, it was admissible. Lana played the clip in court. The sound echoed in that silent room like thunder. Cassandra's voice, unmistakable, speaking the truth at last. The courtroom exploded. Murmurs. Gasps. The judge banged his gavel, but the damage was done. She was exposed. Not as a victim. But as an architect of lies. That night, she didn't go home. She was arrested. Fraud. Perjury. Conspiracy to launder. Kessler warned me there might be a federal component, because of the offshore accounts and interstate wire transfers. She might serve real time. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was hollow. A week later, I stood outside the building we built together, the company that bore both our names, at least for now. The board had voted unanimously to remove Cassandra's stake, pending court approval. Investors were backing me. The press had started to shift the narrative. We weren't the scandal anymore, we were the company that survived one. I was still standing. But I wasn't the same man. I walked into my office, sat down, and finally opened the old photo album I hadn't touched since this started. There we were, me and Cassandra, in the early days. Before the deception. Before the masks. She was smiling at me like I was the only person in the world. And maybe, for a moment, she believed it herself. I don't know what parts of it were real anymore. But I know I was. And I know I'll never let anyone rewrite that truth. 2 months passed. The court ruled in my favor on all counts. The divorce was finalized. Cassandra forfeited her stake in the company. No spousal support. No assets. Just a small trust we were legally required to maintain in case of appeal. She pled guilty to lesser charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. 18 months, minimum security. She wouldn't serve it all. But she'd serve enough. On the day of her sentencing, I received a letter in a plain white envelope with no return address. It read, "I was never supposed to care about you. You were a way out. But somewhere along the way, you became the one thing I couldn't con, because you never stopped seeing who I was. Even when I didn't. I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed you to know. I didn't fake everything. Some of it, I really did feel. And maybe that's what makes this the worst con of all. See. I didn't write back. I just burned the letter. Because some things don't deserve to be remembered in ink. They say revenge is best served cold. But they're wrong. It's not cold. It's not satisfying. It's empty. Because once the war is over, once you've won, what you're left with is silence. No noise. No enemies. Just the echo of all the things you sacrificed to make it through. And the person staring back at you in the mirror. He's not the same man who walked into the storm. He's someone who knows what people are capable of. Someone who understands that love is just another high-stakes investment. And some partnerships aren't just dangerous, they're fatal. I'm rebuilding now. The company is stable. We've rebranded under a new name. One that doesn't remind me of her. I'm hiring smarter. Slower. No more blurred lines between personal and professional. And as for love, well, I'm not rushing into anything. But I'm not closed off, either. I've learned that truth can rot behind a smile. That not all betrayals are loud. Some come disguised as loyalty. But I've also learned something else. Survival isn't about what they take from you. It's about what they can't take. Your clarity. Your resilience. Your name. I kept mine. And that's how I won.